In this episode of our photography review show, I'm gonna review landscape, macro, and mixed team photographers. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of our photography review show. I hope you had a great week, and I hope you're ready for more reviews. Now, if you've never been here before, my name is Jakub, and I'm a creator and founder here at Clever Photographer. For the past 7 or 8 months, I've been reviewing your photos, and I reviewed thousands of images from hundreds of photographers. Now, if you would like to join us for the next episode of the Photography Review Show, all you need to do is to join our membership, Clever Photographer Plus. For the little fee, you will get hundreds of textures, overlays, LUTs, brushes, presets, everything you can imagine, as well as access to this Photography Review Show and our Clever Photographer Academy. So if you want to find out more about it, make sure you head to our website, cleverphotographer.com. So we are once again in Lightroom CC, and we have 4 photographers to look at. So starting with the landscape photographers, we have a John Lister here and 2 images from him. So let's jump straight into the camera details. Looking at this beautiful image with this kind of very warm and romantic sky over the church. Looking at your camera, Nikon Z6 with the Nikkor 24 or Nikkor 24-70. And from the camera settings, ISO 100, 24mm, f8, 1/160th of a second. As the setting goes, perfect. ISO 100, keeping it nice and low, avoiding any additional noise. 24mm, which is looking great on the image. f8 as well, giving you kind of sharpness all the way, even including the mountains at the back. So that's very impressive. 1/160th of a second, making sure that exposure is nice. Now, looking at it, I'm not 100% sure. I wouldn't put my hand in a fire for the sky if it's actually the sky that was there originally. However, I think it's looking very, very nice. Now, let's just zoom in to 100%. Looking at the details, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, they are really nice. Nice sharpness. The light is also very pleasing. We're getting kind of strong light from here. And here, however, it's well balanced, so that I think works very, very well. And the depth and the level of texture and details, I think works very nicely too here. Now, when we come to the second image, let's have a look at it. So these trees with very dramatic background. Again, looking at it from the technical point of view, it's the same camera, same lens. However, this is ISO 100, 38mm, f8, 1/200th of a second. So as the camera setting goes, I think you obviously spot on here. f8, again, making sure that you have the details all the way. 1/200 second give you all these details in the sky, which I think is very, very smart. And again, when we zoom into 100%, the details on the trees are really, really nice. I wonder if in this case, if it wouldn't have been worth it to maybe go for like a long exposure, at least for the water, to smooth it a little bit more and remove the texture away from the water, if it would have been possible. There are 2 ways you could have do it. You could have gone for longer exposure, or you could have tried to go lower towards the water. That sometimes helps as well. I'm not sure with this level of movement, but when there are little bigger waves, the lower you go, the less of the movement is visible. It's nothing crazy. However, obviously there is a texture. And if you would have gone for the longer exposure, you would have maybe got even more reflection in the water. Other than that, moving to the composition. Now, obviously the trees are nice. However, I would have wished that somehow you could have stepped back and get more of the reflection in. I think it looks a little bit cut out here. Other than that, obviously the depth is very nice here with the starting tree going through. The flow is nice, but it's just missing the reflection, which I think is really strong composition component, which I think would be great to have there. On the benefit, I also really like that you have everything out of the tree, that you didn't cut anything. Again, I think the depth with the kind of foreground, middle ground, background works very well. The sky is very nice too, with lots of details in it. So for me, it's just the cropping and the framing of the image. Going for this one, now I really like that. My only wish would have been that you would have gone a little bit more towards looking at it, so I guess towards right on your side, and maybe get a little bit more of the path, using that as a leading line and a kind of initial flow inside of the image. I think would be really, really cool. Also, lots of kind of high frequency texture, which is not necessarily that bad in this case, because it's kind of dark. This stone, the fact that it's half cut is also a little bit of a shame. So that's just the beginning. Other than that, I think it's great. I think the church is very lovely. I personally love these compositions with the kind of single structures and single houses, abandoned houses in the middle of the landscape. I think it's looking great. I love the sky and whatever you've done to it. So I think there's a plus and minuses, and just kind of few tips of what else you could do to the image. When it comes to post-processing, it's just that the sky looks like it has a different color temperature than the bottom. Other than that, it's working. I mean, it looks realistic enough, but I wonder if maybe with a little bit of brush and extra magenta, adding to this part of the image, if it would make it a little bit more realistic. Not necessarily, I think maybe you would have to make it more blue or warm. I'm not sure. It's just something about that. Other than that, the vignette around, the glow behind the church, I think that all works very, very nicely. I think the cropping is good here as well. I think it's looking great. Now on this one, the colors are not really great. It's very, very moody. So I would probably, either I would go black and white, but I feel like we've been doing that all the time. So maybe I would go more contrasting, more kind of rough and, just kind of like a big punch in the contrast and clarity and so on. So if we increase the contrast and even bring down the exposure a little bit more to bring more drama in the sky, and then jump into the effects and push the clarity or minus. So I think this is a case where we want to do minus for the water, and then we want to do plus for the trees. So how could we do this? Well, let's see. So what masking options we have here? We could go for luminance. Let's go. Let's see if that would help us. Yep. So where we are here, I think something maybe like this. So you can see we have still the tree selected, but the water is already unselected. And when we go with the clarity, we can really push it. Yep, something like this. Maybe I think we need to increase the selection a little bit more to probably something like this. And then on the water, I would do with another brush, create brush and minus clarity. I would paint over the water and make it a little bit more kind of dreamy, just to smooth it up a little bit. Nothing crazy, but maybe just a little bit. So that would be one option. Obviously, we could do a little stronger dodge and burn here with minus exposure. Obviously, this is way too strong, but something like this, again, over the trees. So something like this, then create one maybe for the radial gradient and really emphasize the glow at the back there. Again, we can add a little bit of warmth to it and maybe minus clarity and do something like this. I love the crop otherwise. I think the 9, is it 9 on 16? Am I right? 9 on 16. No, you could have, I wonder if you would have gone closer and actually won't see the reflection. It's a little bit different as well. It gives you a different motion to it. You don't have to, but maybe the 9 on 16 would look nice as well. It's just the reflection. Anyway, John, I talk long enough about your images. So maybe a little stronger push. Black and white would maybe look nice too. Let's have a look. Yeah, something to try as well. On this one, I think it's all nice. I love the image. Both of them very, very good. Thank you so much for sharing them with us. You take care, stay safe, and send us more images in the future. Which brings us to next photographer and Laurie Griezmann. Laurie, I haven't seen your images for a while. I hope you're staying safe and everything is good. So what we have, this kind of long exposure creek or river, and this kind of very interesting tree. So let's talk about it. Let's jump to it. Let's start with the technical details. Looking at this one, loving the sky at the back. Beautiful, lots of details, brilliant. And from the camera setting, ISO 100, 28mm, f8, 1/80th of a second. So as the camera setting goes on your Canon 5D Mark IV 24-105 lens, I think the camera setting is great. Yeah, ISO 100, keeping it without noise, 28mm, nice and wide, f8, making sure that everything is sharp, and 1/80th of a second, just making sure that the exposure is correct. Obviously, the sun is a little bit harsh, giving us all these shadows, but that's how it is. And in connection with the environment, you kind of expect it. I really like the sky again and all its details. Lots of texture as well across, but I think the sky, as it's kind of smooth, it really balances it together, so I'm happy with that. And that's about it on this one. Now on this one, we're looking at the same camera, am I right? And same lens, just ISO 100, 24mm, f4, and 1/20th of a second. Now, ISO 100, spot on, 24mm, so really wide as far as your lens goes. f4, probably to try to bring down the shutter speed, if I'm right. And the shutter speed went to 1/20th of a second, which generally, for a handheld, we suggest between 140 and 1/50th of a second. For kind of longer exposure, you would be looking for a tripod. And when I zoom in, I can definitely see the motion in the hand. You can see that it's not that sharp. Now, when it comes to long exposure, and specifically with the creek, it is really important that the parts, which like a ground and the trees and the stones, are super sharp, because then they give the contrast towards the water. So this should be all really, really sharp, because then it works. So I love the idea. And I mean, when you're looking at it from far, it's not a big deal. But then when you zoom in, and if you would print it, it would be quite visible. So Laurie, great idea. 1/20th of a second, little tricky to handheld. I would be going for a tripod in this case. And if you would have gone for the tripod, you could again go even slower and maybe get the water even smoother. So that would be it. I wonder if something like Topaz Sharpen AI could fix this, but yeah, that's about it. Composition wise, I love it. I think it's tilting just a little bit. I would jump into the cropping and see if maybe something like this would make it a little bit more realistic, and it looked like it could. I would even zoom in a little bit more to have the kind of main creek in a center and do something like this. Am I too high? Maybe to have a little bit more landing zone here. So I would do something like this, Laurie, on this one on a composition. I really like the flow. I think that looks very nice. Obviously, all the surroundings around giving us really nice color and luminance contrast. So altogether, very, very good. Talking about this one and composition. First, I love that you kept the whole tree in a frame. I think that's really important for it, as it is your main subject. I think pretty much all the roots are there. Now, on my liking, you're a little bit too close to the frame here. But other than that, I think it's very nice. You have the flow starting from here, leading towards the tree. There's the contrast of the tree and the sky at the back, which works great. There is a little bit of depth. One thing, again, I think maybe we talk about it on another of your images. It's always good to place there something which could give us a sense of scale. Now, of course, in this case, it could probably only be a person, but it would be a nice additional element you could add to the composition itself. Other than that, I think it works. For post-processing, it's lovely. Let's have a look at your white balance. If we go for auto, it only makes it warmer, of course. And if we go a little bit warmer, maybe just a touch, that would be nice. I would also jump into the light and add a little bit extra contrast. And now it feels like we have a lots of green in it. Let's go back to the color and push a little bit the tint, just a touch, somewhere around. It's funny that until you push the tint, you don't see it. And then you push it and you suddenly see how much the picture is green or blue sometimes even. So that's what I would do there. A little bit of contrast we done already. And maybe a little vignette. I would do maybe even vignette with the radial gradient. So place the radial gradient over your main subject and then invert it and just go with the exposure down a little bit. Something like this. We could create a new linear gradient from the bottom as well, just to close it a little bit more and bring more attention towards the main subject and bring down the exposure from there. So something like this. This is what you could do. Now, going into this one. Oh, this image will always look great with black and white. No question about it, because then you jump into your curve and you create 2 points. You make the, oh, nope. You make the darker points even darker and the brighter points even brighter. And you can do something like that, of course. What else could you do here? If it wouldn't be black and white, you would jump back to the color and see with adding a little bit of pink just to make it more realistic. What I like to do with a long exposure is to actually use the eyedrop picker and just go for the water, because generally the water has, you need to find the brightest part, of course. Generally the water has the best white balance. So then you get something like this. And what I would do then, go into the effects, bring down the vignette, bring down the clarity, create new brush, increase the exposure on the brush, and then paint over the water just to highlight it a little bit more. Then you can create another brush, bring the exposure down, and paint over the areas which you want add contrast to. And there you have it. Laurie, thank you so much for sharing the images with you. It's always a pleasure to see them and review them. I hope you're staying safe. You take care, and please send us more images when you can. Which brings us to Evgeniy. Evgeniy back with macro photography after 2 successful weeks. So let's have a look at it. Starting with this one, I'm assuming that's cherries. Cherries. Is it either it's not from this year yet, or maybe it's 2016, I think, because I thought that it's a little bit early for cherries. Anyway, talking about camera, same thing, Pentax. K100D Super with your camera settings, ISO 200, 300 millimeters, 125th second. Now looking at it, first of all, I absolutely love the glare and the burst on the cherry. I think that's looking really, really cool. And I love the black light, backlight on the cherry as well. Now looking at it like this, the noise is very good. The sharpness, I wonder where is the sharpness exactly. You can see it a lot on the leaf. You can see it on these two, a little bit on this one as well. Then this one is very soft. Yeah, this is, again, playing with the f-stop is really important for pictures like this. I think in this case, I would rather have more in focus and then be able to maybe put some parts outside of the focus and make them a little softer in post-processing than having them not sharp. So that would be just a suggestion. But the light is very interesting. Love the glare. It's lovely contrast, and the camera settings spot on. Now, talking about this one, unfortunately, this brings us a little bit back to, talking about light again, it's very, very contrasty compared to the last few images I saw with this kind of really diffused, beautiful light. This one is really, you just look at it, and even though they are beautiful flowers, it's really busy because of all the different parts and light on the image, as well as the background looks really dark compared to quite dark flowers as well. Now, it works when you have kind of bright colored flowers, but on the flowers like this, it's already dark background, then you have a kind of dark flowers. It's a little bit complicated. Anyway, well, looking at it, it's same camera, same lens, ISO 200, 300 millimeters on your lens, f8, 125th of a second on a shutter speed. Now, looking at it, it's all sharp, and I really like that. So that's the first thing. The light coming from somewhere there, again, making this part dark. The background seems to be really, really dark. And yeah, there is lots of shadows and lots of stuff happening around. So just really kind of overwhelming scene. Other than that, all good. Now, talking about composition, I like that the flower is there in a whole piece. I really like that. Although I would probably go for same distance from the edge, so something like this, again following the idea that this part will not really give us anything special, so I would have gone probably for something like this, and I would have brightened the whole thing just a little bit. I think something like this would be good. A little bit of extra contrast maybe, and that's about it from here. Now, going into this one and talking about a composition still, I already jumped into the post-processing. Talking about composition, I think it's lovely. This picture I really, really like. I like the light from behind. I think that works super, super well. I think, again, I would go just a little bit closer, just again, focusing just on the cherries, avoiding everything else, and bringing the focus on them. Now, the depth is nice, although it's really tricky to say which ones are your main subject. So I'm assuming it's this one with the glare. However, the other ones in focus and so on. But the color contrast is brilliant here. The light contrast is really nice. So altogether, I prefer this image. When it comes to post-processing, I would jump into the effects, do some extra vignette on it, I think. And then with a brush, I would do some stronger dodge and burn. Now, something like this. Why I can't see my brush now? Because I'm not on a brush. So again, brush and extra exposure. Perfect. And maybe just paint over some of the cherries to make them pop out a little more. Maybe even some of the leaves. And do something like this. Well, I really like this image actually. I think it makes me feel very much summery, and it's really nice. On this one, a little bit more work to do, but I think some parts, especially the light, has to come from the capturing of the image rather than post-processing. And in overall, it's still a very pretty image. It's just an suggestion and things you could do to bring your images to an extra level. Anyway, Evgeniy, thank you very much for sharing your images with us. It's always a pleasure to review them. If you have more, make sure you send them to us in the future. And until next time, stay safe and take care. Which brings us to the last photographer of this week, Zdenek. So Zdenek, let's jump straight to it. We have this yellow bird and the landscape image. So starting with the bird, let's have a look at the camera settings. And here we have a Canon 600D with the lens 55 to 250 millimeters. And on the camera settings, ISO 100, 250 millimeters, f7.1, 1/400 of a second. So it's a very pretty image. Now with the camera settings, I think you spot on there. 1/400 second, that's how you say, the bird must be quite steady because that's quite low. However, it worked. I think the sharpness is very decent here. ISO 100, making sure that you avoid any additional noise, 250 millimeters, so really zoomed in. f7.1, giving you still nice, lovely details at the back and giving you really sharpness mostly on his head and legs, and then graduated softness towards the back of the animal. I think that is very smart, and it looks cool. Really like the image. The light is obviously a little harsh, but nothing crazy. You get just maybe one shadow here. Other than that, it's very pretty. Moving to this one, talking about technical part. So this image of the tree, lots of trees recently, Zdenek, I have to say that. ISO 100, 11 millimeters, so really wide as well. Either you were really close or you done lots of cropping here. F10, 1/160th second on your shutter speed. So talking about that, ISO 100, spot on. 11 millimeters, a little bit wide for me. I wonder again, if you are really close to the tree or if you've done some cropping to it. F10 giving us sharpness all the way to the back. I'm always impressed by what is the camera able to do. I mean, you're standing here, you're taking a picture of this, you get all these details, and then at the back you have all the details. I mean, if there was have been tree or something, you would be able to see it. Crazy. And 160 second giving you all these lovely details. Also the sky looking great. Now I am not 100% sure if the sky was there or not, but I will say it was. I will believe you. Although there are some artifacts. Who cares? Anyway, because in overall the image looks great. I really like it. I love the tree being in the full frame. I think that's really important. It's a clear main subject. The contrast of the background and the tree works very well too, Zdenek. So all in all, I think composition-wise, this is lovely. It's a lovely... I wonder if there is like a more story about the tree, and maybe you can just shoot me a message, let me know what the story is, but I think in overall, for me, it works. And on the bird and the composition, well, I would go a little bit closer because I think when he's facing like this, you don't necessarily need to give him that much space around him, just a touch. But other than that, I think it's brilliant. I really like it. The contrast is great. The depth is great. The level of details is great. The colors are great. As a composition goes, I think it's beautiful. It's a beautiful capture and I love it. Post-processing, I can't really add much to this. Let's see if we would go just double checking the white balance. I always like when I go to white balance, I put it on auto and the sliders don't move. Means that you spot on with the white balance. So that's exactly what's happening here. Of course, you can always highlight the main subject by using something like vignette. just a touch. You could, of course, use some brush to do some additional dodge and burn, but I think overall it's a lovely picture and I would leave it as natural as it is. Now on this one, the only thing, everything works for me, except I think the sky is a little bit too bright blue for me. I wonder if we would jump into the color and then go to the HSL and into the hue, and on the blue, let's see what we can do. Can we make it a little darker? And then we can jump into the luminance and just bringing it down. Okay, that was too much on the hue, I think. So you don't want it like this. You want it more like this, I think. On the saturation, do we want it more or less? I wonder if we would go less saturation on it, if it wouldn't match more the background. So maybe just something like this. So then the blue doesn't overwhelm the image. So that's what I would do. I would leave it there. Now, in overall, maybe a little bit extra warmth, because we are in the middle of a desert, or you know what I mean. And with the tint green or pink, well, I think the 0 is good. Extra vibrance, maybe just a touch. And that's about it. You know me, I always go for the effects and vignette just to add special look to it. And I think in this case, just to highlight the tree a little bit more, I would just push the contrast a little bit more. So Zdenek, there you have it. Those are the two images. Love them both. This one is great. I really like what you're doing with the trees now. I think that works super well. The bird and the animals are getting better as well. So that is super cool and really nice to see. So overall, thank you very much for sending us your images. I can't wait for more next week. So that same goes for all of you folks. If you want to join us for a next week episode of our photography review show, all you need to do is to join our membership, Clever Photographer Plus, and there you will get for a little fee a full set of tools every month, as well as access to our Clever Photographer Academy and this photography review show. For today, thank you very much for watching. My name was Jakub, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.